And DD India correspondent Amrit Pal Singh joins us live from New Delhi now. Amrit, good morning. What is the latest that you're learning on the developments that are coming in, particularly any reaction coming in from Iran so far?
That's right. The Iranians have reacted saying that every target, the American soldier and American asset is a legitimate target for Iran now. They are making it very clear that they want to, or at least they're sounding so, that they want to take it on the escalatory ladder. It's clear that the Iranians wouldn't lie low after taking this attack. I do not know whether this would be limited escalation because Iran would also know that they are no match to a combined Israeli-American might. Now that Fordow has been attacked, Natanz and Efsan were easy targets by the Israelis also, but Fordow was something which the Israelis did not have the capability to attack. Now the B-2 bombers of the Americans have did that. Of course, there is understandable concern about that in the international community, including the nuclear IAEA, the nuclear watchdog, has said that this is a dangerous situation and this could escalate into a very, very dangerous situation. They are worried about what if there are nuclear radiations, etc. We'll have to wait to watch because this is so recent, these attacks, because those reports will still come in. But the Iranians at least are putting up a brave face, saying that now every American asset, every American soldier in the region is a legitimate target. I don't know whether they have the capability to attack the Americans because the American guard would be up right now, but they would want to be seen to be attacking American assets. If not the American assets, because they would at least be seen as attacking Israeli assets. Because right now, America seems to be an extension of Israel or vice versa, because they have, though America was supporting Israel throughout in this campaign for the past 8 days, but now they have directly entered the battlefield by sending the B-2 bombers inside the Iranian airspace, hitting the 3 nuclear sites. So it looks right now that Iran would want to be seen as responding or retaliating to this.
Right, Amrit. Also, help me put the facts across as far as Iran's own nuclear capacity was concerned. It said it was meant for civilian enrichment. Fordow, Natanz and Isfahan were the key enrichment centers, possibly located below the ground, deep underground, for which the American ammunition were very important for Israel to be able to target those. And that's what has been done by America in the past few hours as we speak. And B-2 bombers there were reports of them flying from America towards West Asia, and they seem to have carried out the operation as we understand.
That's right. As I said, Natanz and Efsan were still targets which Israel could handle on their own account, because their depth from the ground is not that much. But Fordow is something which is said to be 90 meters below Earth. Now, this is what, to attack this, you needed B-2 bombers. Donald Trump is very right in saying when he says that only American military had the capability. The American B-2 bombers could have struck so deep inside, and they seem to have struck these targets with military precision, to use Donald Trump's words, and have completely obliterated these 3 facilities or nuclear sites. Iran has also confirmed attacks on their 3 nuclear sites. So it seems that the Americans have been able to carry out attacks on 3 Iranian sites successfully and cause considerable damage to them. The claims of Donald Trump will have to be verified still, that have they been completely obliterated. But even if they have not been completely obliterated, assuming that, I'm saying, they would have, the kind of damage that would have been done to these sites, it'll be a while before they're up and functional again, if the Iranians want to carry on with their nuclear enrichment program, the uranium enrichment program. So it would have caused them considerable damage, if not completely obliterated, as Donald Trump claims. Shubhendu?
Right. Amrit, you say that it would be very difficult, naturally, for Iran to take on the combined might of Israel and America. But what happens to Iran's allies? Russia and China had spoken quite vociferously, supporting Iran, also almost sending out a warning to America from entering this conflict?
Okay, very interesting question. Now let's break it down into what could Russia do, what could China do. Russia hasn't directly entered the battlefield, though it has extended verbal support to Iran, saying that this escalation is not good. But the Russians are taken up by their own war; they're fighting their own war. Donald Trump is holding the olive branch to Vladimir Putin. So I think diplomats would be working the phone lines to both Moscow and Beijing, dissuading them from joining the war. So the Russians, I don't know to what extent will they step into that, because they have their own mess to clean up. They have their own war to fight. Can they open to France? What kind of a support can they extend apart from diplomatic or verbal support? Or moral support. One will have to see. China, on the other hand, China has been assisting Iran. China, in my opinion, will continue assisting Iran, even if China does not come into the fray as the Americans have come on the behalf of the Israelis. If China does not openly come into the fray, but I think China will keep backing Iran with all it can. It will try to pump in money. It will try to pump in weapons. It will try to pump in equipment for the Iranians to continue fighting them. Because the Chinese want to fight the Americans, but they don't want to get on to head-on conflict with the Americans, because they're doing the tariff negotiations. Even if you look at Op Sindoor, the Chinese, of course, they are good friends with the Pakistanis, but by fighting India, they were in a way proxy fighting the Americans because it was perceived that the Americans would stand behind the Indians in this war with Pakistan. So I think what China would do in this case also would be proxy fighting. Russia, it still remains to be seen how Russia responds. To what extent does Russia support Iran in this, Shubhendu?
Right. Amrit, also, what are the options that Iran would have to respond, and what do these developments augur for the Supreme Leader, Ayatollah Khomeini?
Oh, the Americans have made it clear they're not looking at regime change. Donald Trump has said as much. They're not looking at regime change. They're not looking at killing Khamenei. They can take out Khamenei the day they want to. But I don't think they would want to take out Khamenei right now, because that would mean that it would escalate further. Anyway, Khamenei has transferred, all powers to the IRC, saying that the Revolutionary Guard can take its own decision. So, in a sense, he's authorized. He remains a central figure. He remains a respected figure. He remains the force behind the IRC right now. But I don't think the Americans want to go to that extent. And what we saw unfold at Kananaskis in Canada at the G7 summit, we saw that spat in the digital space between Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump on, ceasefire and regime change, etc. So the West clearly is not on the same page. Other European nations who may not have voiced it as vociferously or aggressively as Emmanuel Macron did at Kananaskis, but the general consensus at the plenary in Kananaskis was the rest of the Europe, at least, is, and including Japan, is not with the Americans when it comes to looking at a regime change. I think Donald Trump realizes that. So as far as Khamenei goes, that is the situation. How will the Iranians react? I think the Iranians would want to be seen as retaliating to this. They wouldn't want to be seen as lying down, because in the Islamic world, they remain the sole power that seems to be challenging the American might or the Israeli might. The others, the Sunni world, seems to be sort of, just giving the OIC, including the OIC, just giving verbal support to the Palestinian cause or to the Gazan cause, etc. But beyond that, really, they haven't done much, and they sit well with the Americans, if not with the Israelis, at least in the open. Some say they sit well with with Bibi Netanyahu as well. But even if we leave that aside, I think Iran would not want to, leave this mantle. It would want to be seen as standing up to the American might. for the rhetoric they have created for their own people and also the wider Islamic world. So there would be a lot of expectations from Iran. So Iran wouldn't want to do that. But I think reality would also be weighing on the minds of the Iranians, especially the Iranian generals, that, the clergy aside, it's finally the IRC which has to fight this battle. No matter how much, they may be driven by that sentiment of the clergy, but they would also do a military assessment. And they would know very well that they are no match to the combined might of Israel and America. They can probably stand up to Israel to the extent that they can, and they have in the past few days. They have hit targets inside Israel, but beyond that, they know their limitations. I think my sense is right now that they would want to take it to some level of escalation, but it will be limited escalation before they get down to the table. If you read or listen to Arakchi at Geneva very closely, the Iranian foreign minister, he says, no returning to the negotiating table unless Israel stops attacks. Now, if Israelis and the Americans give them a breathing space, let them do a bit of retaliation, cause whatever limited damage that they can, and just take that and be happy knowing that they have caused much more damage to them, and not take it as an affront to their pride and their ego. I think the Iranians would be amenable to coming back to the table after a display of some fireworks. Shubhendu.
And Amrit, when Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel spoke, he said that in a way that history has been made and America has achieved what no other nation in the world could. These developments, especially in the past few weeks, where it did seem that President Donald Trump of the US and Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel were perhaps not on the same page as far as the unfolding conflict was concerned. President Trump really appeared to be investing in some sort of unpredictable diplomacy. But with these developments, America and Israel back on the same page in no uncertain terms.
Looks like that, yes. At least now when they, join the battlefield, they, jumping into the battlefield, they're clearly on the same page. And that's why you see such sort of language of coming in from Netanyahu, thanking the Americans, saying that they're protectors of the civilization, etc., using that kind of language, thanking the Americans. So I think they are on the same page. The Americans, it seems very clearly that is not just looking at diplomatically backing Israel, but also militarily joining the battlefield, fighting from the front, putting boots on the ground. I mean, if not boots, but at least bombers in the airspace. Which is an equivalent to putting boots on the ground. So I think for Netanyahu, he would want to see this as a big victory. Remember, Netanyahu's other objective is also domestic. He is riding the tiger. He knows the moment he gets off the tiger, it will eat it. He could go to jail if this war stops. He fought with Gaza. He carried that on. He, decimated or near decimated Hezbollah. He's been able to effect, with the American help, a regime change in Syria. So who is left? Iran. He would want to come out as a victor to the Israeli people and go down as a hero. And if the Israeli people decide not to send him to jail for his other crimes, for corruption allegations, which are serious corruption allegations against him. So I think he would want to see as a wartime prime minister who came out as a victor. So I think he is playing that card. He's following that script. Donald Trump, as you said, he's an unpredictable personality, but in this case, he's clearly chosen to side with the Israelis.
Right. Amrit, also taking cue from the domestic politics of Netanyahu, in his address, he speaks about the challenge of a dangerous weapon in the hand of a dangerous regime. So there's a weapon and there is a regime that Israel appears to be concerned about. The weapon, for now, it appears, has been taken care of. Regime stays, and as you say, Netanyahu's own a certain political advantage in continuing with conflict in the region. Again, I'm coming back to the same question about the regime, the Ayatollah Khomeini regime in Iran and Netanyahu.
Ayatollah Khamenei. Khomeini is dead a long time back. Ayatollah Khamenei. Ayatollah Khamenei is no doubt the supreme leader, but in this conflict, he's a figurehead. The clergy leads that, but it's the IRC which is fighting the battle on the ground. I think if Khamenei is taken out or a regime change is affected, who runs the system there? Will the Americans be able to install a regime that will completely follow the American script? I think the Americans also realize that. And Europeans have been telling Trump that, look, the time is not ripe for that. It doesn't make political sense to go ahead with that. Hit them militarily, achieve your military objective, but don't let them get a nuclear weapon in their hands. The G7 joint statement very clearly said that. They called for de-escalation also. They want to weaken this regime and let it continue, because if they affect a regime change, then there will be too much of chaos. And the Americans have always caused chaos wherever they've gone. They caused chaos in Iraq, they caused chaos in Libya, they caused chaos in Afghanistan. Finally, what happened? They went in to fight the Taliban is back again. And they had the talks with the Taliban in Doha, and they are back again. So what did they achieve? Apart from getting Osama bin Laden, which they got after many years, not even in Tora Bora, but in Abbottabad in Pakistan, their own allies' backyard. I think regime, Netanyahu would want a regime change. But I think the Americans are not on the same page, or at least Donald Trump at the moment is not. Why I say at the moment? Because if Iran escalates it, if the Ayatollah says it will be a fight to the finish, come matter what, come what may, it will be a fight to the finish. I think only then will the Americans be looking at or considering the option of a regime change there. Also, remember, there is no congressional support for Donald Trump on that. He has to factor that in too. After his attacks, if you look at the congressional statements coming out, they said, well, it's unconstitutional, it's illegal what he's done. He has not taken congressional permission, though he doesn't care much for that. He came out with full force when he made that statement a little while back, with Vance on his side, with Mark Rubio and Pete Hegseth just behind him. He congratulating the Joint Chiefs of Staff, saying that General Kane will be addressing the media along with the Secretary of Defense tomorrow morning, American morning or night. I think the Americans wouldn't want to do that. That question will only come into play if the Iranians escalate it to an extent where they just refuse to come down to the table. But I don't think that the Iranians would want to do that, because the Iranians would also be steeped in reality. Shubhendu.
There, Amrit, thank you for joining us with those updates.